welcome to the CG Pro webinar. Tonight we have Bennett Bellott with us, and we are going to be talking about all things game design. We're going to be talking about game design in Unreal, and Bennett's going to be leading tonight. He's going to be going through game design, getting into the games industry, what it means and what it takes to get into the games industry. I'm just going to do a quick intro to Bennett. Bennett is a wonderful individual, very talented artist, comes from the games industry. He's been also in education for quite some time now, and Bennett works for Chapman University as a senior instructor, and he is also doing instruction with us now, which we're very, very, very pleased about. Bennett's going to be leading the charge with our game design in Unreal class, which we have coming up in February. So if anybody is interested in that, then please stick around for the QA. You can ask questions about that course and about anything that Bennett is going to go through. But yeah, Bennett, welcome. Welcome. Thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, it's also kind of wonderful to kind of get this kick-started with game art design, talking about the Unreal Engine as well. Also what we're going to be offering with CG Pro. Again, I'm also here to answer any of the questions. I'm a veteran. I'll go into this a lot with the presentation I'm going to be doing, but just to give you an idea, I've been in everything from the comic book industry. I was part of Image Comics when it first came out in the 90s. In the 90s, I then went into video games, and after that, I went into animation. Then I went back into education as well as now virtual productions. So I've actually been working with the Unreal technology when it was just called Unreal. You know, no numbers, none after that. And again, I've been both using it professionally as well as been teaching it as well. Several of my students that have gone to graduate are now, goodness, some are at senior level, some are leads, you know, and many of them are working on the AAA titles. And the thing you can go look at is the success rate that I had, which is, you know, they always talk about some of the schools like USC or some of the other ones they list very highly as far as top level of games. Well, the funny thing is that if you looked at the annual numbers that I did, I actually did twice, if not three times, of getting people in the industry than even the top level did. So we were kind of like one of those best kept secrets, you know, in the game industry for a while. But again, it's one of those ones of where this was something that I took as far as a program, built up, adapted, and then was very successful with. So again, it's kind of like, and another thing is, how do you get into the industry? Well, we're going to talk about that. One of the first question is, what do you want to do in the industry? You know, and because everyone has a different path, everyone has a different idea, everyone has a different choice, like, hey, I want to work for this company and I want to do this, or I want to be an indie, or I want to be mobile or VR or any of the other ones. And so it's like, well, let's start here and then let's build it up from there. And that's kind of like what this whole idea is about, which is we're going to start here, but eventually, like I've talked with you with CG Pro, we want to expand out further because we're going to have a lot of people with different interests, with different ideas and different approaches. And again, we're going to talk about what separates this from some of the other ones out there. Because yes, there are other groups out there. There are schools, there are online, there are a lot of them. What separates us from that? And I'll go into detail and I'll answer any question you might have.
Fantastic. Well, I know that you're going to go through a presentation and then we're going to have about 15 minutes or so at the end for a QA. So please, to everybody out there listening, post your questions whenever you like. We will save them to answer at the end. So please stick around for that section. Bennett, that's over to you.
Started here, and let me get this shared. All right, so before I get the whole mirror effect. All right, so this is about getting into the game industry. All right, this has been updated. And it's basically as current as you can get, because I actually was looking at even some of the news in the industry and kind of keeping ahead. Now, when it comes to me, who am I? All right, my name is Bennett Bellott. I've worked as a game designer for studios like Interplay, Black Isle Studios, Codefire, Contraband Entertainment, Activision, and Real Time Associates. And again, with that, I've run the gamut from doing RPGs to survivor horrors to actual medical. I was one of the first groups that actually did Xbox Live and created a multiplayer game for that. But I've also been working in the industry. I worked for groups like Titmouse, Nickelodeon. I even did work with Steve Oedekerk and the Thumb War series. I've also been an instructor for over 12 years. I've taught game art design, especially over at the Art Institute of Orange County. And even there, when I was there, I was the director. So I became in charge of game art design as well as visual game programming. So I had both aspects, which is actually very unique because most schools, they'll have game art as a spinoff of something. And then they'll have computer science with the programmers. And it's very rare that you have both groups in the same room, let alone in the same building. That's even true over at Chapman. We have artists, but then we have the computer science people, the ones that are doing the programming over in the other side of the campus. So sometimes you don't get to see that. This was a unique situation because we can actually have programmers, artists go through school together, learn, put together projects, and even more so support each other and communicate with each other through getting into the industry. When I did this and I took over, within a year, I actually, I think when I took over, there was 40% job placement among our graduates. By the end of the year, I put it at 78, which means 3 out of 4 of my graduates would get a job in the industry within a year of graduating. And that is in the industry. That's not going to GameStop or being at Best Buy and felling. No, these are actual working professionals. And as you can see from the example, this is an example of many of the students that I've taught. Many of them are actually names in the industry. Some work at Epic, many work at Blizzard, some have went into animation, some, are recognizable names. In fact, there was 3 of my graduates on Callisto Protocol, and on Last of Us 2, I had 5 of them on that. So that's pretty good for a record. Again, one of the other things I've been doing is that besides games, I've also been very much involved with virtual production. That's using the Unreal technology to create shows like The Mandalorian, like what you see with Star Trek, and which is basically is a big deal on what are called ICVFX. I've also been working with Epic. I've done their fellowships. So I've been participating in those and keeping up to date. And a lot of it is that the funny part is in that industry, I'm the one few gamers that comes in to do to actually do virtual production where almost everyone else is coming out of the film industry or visual effects. And so I'm like the one guy on the other side of the fence, but we're all going towards the middle. I also, have a terminal degree called an MFA, and it was in illustration with digital art. But like I said, I've done that with not only digital art, even my grad show, I actually did it in VR. So I actually had my entire gallery inside of VR. So again, using the Unreal technology for various uses. Now, when it comes to the industry, the thing to know is we are growing. In fact, this is a very unique thing about we're coming out of COVID. COVID had a huge effect on most of the industries, but even more so, it had an interesting effect on gaming, and that gaming did really well. As in, we did 3 times the regular business during the COVID years. And like I said, the industry grew and it changed. We'll even talk about that. And that is the pandemic actually helped with, or was helped by gaming. A lot of people said they basically, gaming is what saved them. I kind of laugh because during that time when we were doing the lockdown and people are like, are you going to be okay? You're going to be good. Are you going to be right? I'm like going, okay, first of all, I'm a gamer. Secondly, I'm Gen X. I grew up as a latchkey kid. I actually was used to this as a child, as well as I was one of the first generations to use home PCs. So I was literally bred for this. So we're good. That being said, there's an expectation. Not only is the industry looking to grow in numbers, but also in profit. They're projecting that right now we are at about 235, almost 236. By 2026, they're looking at it being over 321 billion, all right, in just sheer profit. And more importantly, the industry is hiring. There have not been many layoffs. So there is a demand a lot for the gaming industry. And as a result, virtual production is looking for people with Unreal experience. And it's kind of funny is that the best people that know the Unreal Engine are in the game industry, and they have no interest in the virtual production. You know, they just said, oh, okay, that's another group. We're really kind of happy with what's going on with the Unreal Engine. We really want to see what we can do with it. And they have no interest in this growing industry of virtual production. All right. This is another thing that needs to be discussed, and that is how the industry changed, and that is working remotely. Not only was the ability to work remotely not only good for the industry, it actually changed a lot because people showed they were still productive from home. I knew a lot of my friends that were working full time, you know, during COVID lockdown, and they said this was actually one of the best things around for them because they didn't have to worry about the drive. Sometimes their setups at home were better than even the ones at their business. And they said, I felt relaxed and I can get up and I can work anytime. So what was happening is that the businesses saw that. And so even when COVID ended and people started going back, originally they just said, yeah, we're just going to have the full-timers come back and the part-timers can still work from home. And then after a while, a lot of the full-timers said, you know, I kind of liked working from home. Can we do an arrangement? And so what happened is that a lot of studios are now either working, you know, part-time or even full-timers are working from home. And the connections are easy, the setups, and they're productive. And as long as that stuff is getting in, so now we're getting to the point of where you can actually be in the industry and never set foot in the studio. One of my buddies, he actually worked an entire year for Blizzard and never set foot in because his hiring date happened to be right when COVID happened. So he got hired and then he was told, yeah, we can't have you come in, so work from home. So he literally worked an entire year at Blizzard and never set foot in the studio until COVID was over. And then he's like, wow, this is my yearly anniversary and I just set foot in the studio for the first time. Now, that being said, working from home, great. What I would recommend is investing in a high quality PC laptop. All right. So preferably something like right now, the 4000 series for NVIDIA on laptops are coming out in February. Take a good look at those. So any of the gaming rigs are usually good enough for you to actually go and produce stuff for the industry at a quality level and meet the demands. So that is one thing you want to take a really good look at. And I always recommend like the NVIDIA cards because so much is done through that with the Unreal Engine, with gaming in general. So, and a lot of that is kind of like the test bed for you. Now, this also kind of went around. This happened at the beginning of just before COVID and during COVID. And that is, we were looking at the beginning what was called the acquisition wars. Okay. One of the first big ones, of course, is Microsoft. Microsoft went and bought Activision Blizzard for $70 billion. And then in response to that, Sony then turns around and goes and hires or purchases Bungie for $3.6 billion. And then right out of that, it's like it was happening one after the other. And then all of a sudden, Maxon, all right, the makers of Cinema 4D, they went and they bought Pixel Logic, which shocked everyone. All right, because we're like, Maxon? Because that's like 4th or 5th on the list of companies, and ZBrush is like used all the time. Who bought who? And then Unity goes and purchases Weta for $1.6 billion. And then Epic has been doing a lot of absorption, but one of the big things is they do a team up with Autodesk. So they're looking to streamline the whole system. Any questions before I keep going?
I don't think we have any yet. So
Okay.
yeah, you feel free to keep going.
Okay, just make sure I don't lose anyone.
Yeah, no, I'm still here. I'll if anybody asks any, please, people out there, please feel free to ask questions,
Yeah.
and we'll largely be saving them to the end. But feel free to ask them at any point. If a good one comes up that's pertinent, I'll bring it up.
Okay.
So I'm still here.
Okay, good. All right. So one of the things to know is also there's a shift, and that is IP or intellectual property. All right. For the past, 10, 12, plus years, the entertainment industry was really, really heavy on the comic book industry, with the success of the MCU, the DCU starting, stopping, relaunching and such, but they were still around, as well as spinoffs, like whether it's The Boys or any of the Netflix ones. What we'll do is that we saw a huge, huge mining of IP from comic books. And now we got to phase 4 in Marvel, and all of a sudden you see the interest kind of dies down a little bit. Instead, what happened is Hollywood is now switching to video games. They're finding out, like Cyberpunk Edge Runners, okay? That alone actually created 1 million new users for Cyberpunk 2077. All right, to the point of where even the game developer, which was quite surprised by this new influx of players, have gone and created a new expansion pack. Riot Games, they come out with Arcane. Huge success. Not only with that, but it won a lot of awards. It's already been greenlit for a second season. And then you have The Witcher, the original video game series. Now it's been expanded into a live action, and it's in its third season. It also has a spinoff with Blood Origins. And so more and more video games and video game companies are being approached about, hey, what kind of content you have? Can we develop it? That sort. So in other words, we are now catching the attention from Hollywood again for a very different reason, which is IP. So you can expect a lot more IP is going to be picked up very quickly because we still have the streaming wars, the content, the need for IP, plus the idea that we can binge watch, which means we can now do more episodic type stories, kind of like with Castlevania. And what's happening is that games tend to be more episodic than anything else. And so as a result, that really interested is in Hollywood, whether it's animation or whether it's live action. So again, you're going to see more and more IP from video games. And I've been in that hype before. And so a lot of people are going to be interested, which means the industry is going to grow. Also, this happened just at the beginning of COVID. In fact, it happened a year before COVID. And that is what we call the birth of the baby blizzards. What's happening is that Blizzard actually was leaking a lot of, the brain trust. So people that had been there from the very beginning, it got to a point where if you had 10 plus years under your belt, you were a target by some of the upper echelon to be replaced because you're getting expensive. And the way Blizzard works is that if you're there for a certain amount of time, you get a very nice severance package. Well, what was happening was that it wasn't one or two people, it was entire groups. So entire teams were literally leaving Blizzard at the same time and taking their basically golden parachutes, putting them all together and forming new studios. And so within the past now 3, almost 4 years, we have 12 new, what I call baby Blizzards. One of them is Bonfire Studios. Second Dinner, that's the one that just released Marvel Snap. Second Dinner was actually the Hearthstone team. A lot of the seniors left, formed a new studio, and like I said, they made bank off of the fact that they were able to get funding very quickly, as well as they were then able to go and produce something based off the Marvel license, which happens to be their version of Hearthstone using the Marvel characters. There's also Dreamhaven, Frost Giant, Moonshot. A lot of these are located in Southern California. Like I said, Irvine is just kind of like the area for it. And so the only one is like New Tales, which is out of Paris, but Lightforge Games And these are all kind of coming back from COVID, and they're hiring. I know especially Dreamhaven is one of those. Theocracy and Imaginary, those are also ones that are newly formed, and they're also hiring. Now, I mentioned this, and that is virtual production, okay? This started with Jon Favreau, and I was even telling Ed, the funny thing is that Favreau basically left Disney after he did The Jungle Book and decided that he wanted to do VR. So he hooked up with this team called Creative Golem, and they wanted to do a VR game. And that's one he did called Gnomes and Goblins. Well, right after that, he was then offered The Lion King. And so the VR stuff that he did, along with a few other things, he decided to go take with him, initially for lighting and then for VR use. And then he started incorporating that, and he started working out a little bit more and more, and said, we could do this in real time using a game engine, and it will almost be seamless. So they developed this for The Lion King, and then they went and they presented it to Disney, and they said, hey, if we do it this, would you be interested in it? Disney helped develop it, and along with Industrial Light and Magic, and they created what was called the Volume. And this was kind of like the birth of the LED stages and live action, and it's changed Hollywood. I mean, that's an understatement. And now it's this huge growing industry. And what was it? We had literally within a year, we have like 30 now full LED stages, volumes all over the place. And we're looking to about 30 more within the next 2 years. And that's going to be a lot of them in Southern California, all the way to Florida, to Atlanta and such. So these are popping up. And the main thing is Unreal, a game engine, is the foundation for all this to work. So again, the type of skills that you're going to be learning in this course can also translate a lot into this, because you're going to learn the engine, you're going to learn the editor, you're going to learn a lot of things from materials to blueprints to cinematics as well. That's the funny thing. What they call virtual production or cinematics, we in gaming, we used to always just call it in-game cinematics. So again, this is something that it's not old or new to us. This is something we've been doing for decades. And again, it's a huge success. And so we're looking to see an industry grow literally overnight, overnight as in the next 2 years plus. So there's a huge demand. In fact, if you go and look at some of these LED studios, and there's like almost 24 in LA active right now. If you go and look for the job postings, most of them will say looking for someone that understands Unreal. And let's talk about the elephant in the room, the metaverse. Okay. You know about this.
You got to say metaverse at least once in every webinar.
Oh, yeah. The metaverse. What is it? Well, everyone wants to pretend it's Ready Player One. All right. That's what we're looking to get to. That's where it's going to be. Facebook has dumped billions of dollars into it. And where's it going to go? Again, it's one of those things of where it's being developed. I think it's a little ahead of its time. But again, it's one of these things of where, it's like going to the moon. You're going to have a lot of failures before you even break the atmosphere. That's what we're seeing right now, which is the experimentation, the trying to get off the ground, trying to get into orbit, trying to get to the final destination. And we're going to see a lot of failures. That's a given. All right. And the problem is that they're trying to develop the technology. We have it, whether it's Unity, whether it's Unreal, whether it's proprietary. We have the foundation for it. But then again, we need the infrastructure. We need the ease of use. And again, how do you deliver it to the casual thing? That was one of the things I even talked about, which is the disappointment that even though gaming did really well during COVID, the one I thought that would have been the most popular or should have been the most popular did nothing, and that was VR. VR was actually very disappointing during the time of COVID. And you would think, man, that would have been the perfect opportunity. You literally have a captive audience, and VR just kind of like did nothing. And, that's just it. We need to look at the use. And it's not just for gaming. It has to be more of a society thing. It's how you integrate it. It's like, how do you get from your toddler to grandmother to be able to go and put on or use the VR set and such? We might have a solution very soon, and that is Apple, of all people. Apple is planning to release possibly their VR and AR headset this year. And that's going to bring something that the others haven't had yet, and that is brand loyalty. If you just look at an Apple store, you'll see what I'm talking about. I've already told people, if they release the VR and AR headsets this year, by this time next year, we're going to see people in line out front of the Apple store wearing the VR and AR headsets, waiting to get in. So that is just something that we have a new contender, from a very reliable company, that this may change very quickly. So again, it's what's going to power it. Will it be Unreal? Will it be Unity? Will it be something totally different? I know that Epic is working with Apple as well, so I think there's a favorite already. Questions?
Yeah, we do have a few actually. There's some that have come in about the class. So people are aware, I guess, that we are running a class in February, and starting to get a couple of questions about that. One question we got from somebody is, where do you expect we'd be by the end of the 8-week course? If we work hard full time, do you predict that students will be able to complete their first indie project? Would it be more like they're ready and have the knowledge to take the next step, or is 8 weeks enough time to get the basics?
8 weeks is definitely time to get the basics. It's one of it is, what do you plan to create? Because again, if it's one of the ones that's already a given or a blueprint, like a third person, first person, anything that's already there, you can literally get and go, start up immediately. This is like a foundation class that's going to teach you as much of the Unreal Engine, and it's a massive engine, And so within that 8 weeks, you're going to have the confidence. You're going to be able to look at the interface. You're going to be immediately saying I know how the material editor works. I know what Blueprint is. I know how to start manipulating, how to set up my projects, how to get going and create what I want to create. Whether it's on one of the given modes, like I said, third person, first person. It's also an understanding. In other words, it's not just going and it's like, well, I know how to use the engine. It's like, for what do you want to do? Do you understand that by checking on third person, your art is going to be whatever you use for assets or asset creation will change versus first person? Because in first person, people can go right up to your artwork and look at it because they have control of the camera. So they can literally go right up to your wall and look at the details of it. So you'll have to understand is that depending upon the camera changes everything on what you're going to make. If it's third person, okay, it pulls the camera back. You don't have to worry too much about the details much. If you do top down or what we call isometric, you pull back further. In other words, for example, what I call the ZBrush factor, okay? ZBrush is one of those programs that is used a lot in gaming, especially for first person, because you're going to have that up close detail. So you really want to be able to get things in there. Because again, people will look up close to your stuff very quickly. Whereas third person, okay, not as much as detail and such. You might put it on a few things, but not be as, whereas your top down or isometric, you should have no ZBrush at all because it won't be noticeable. So again,
in addition to the art, they're also, I think, curious about the gameplay, how much gameplay they'll learn, blueprinting.
Well, that's one of the nice things is that you'll also learn multiplayer. Okay. That's why in this course, we teach Lyra. Now, there's a lot of other courses out there. They'll say, okay, here's a first person, a third person, but not as many teach coursework with Lyra, which is important because that's multiplayer. Okay. That is something that is very valuable for you because not only will you have other players getting into your level, running around it, you get feedback from your classmates. That is hugely important because when we kind of create our games, especially if we don't get feedback, we kind of get tunnel vision. We see things the way we want it to. We run through the course, we play test, and that's another thing. When we play test ourselves, we already know all the answers. It's when people run around in your level, when they start giving you feedback, and you're like, oh man, I didn't even think about that. Or, hey, this is broken. Were you even aware of that? So playtesting is a huge thing, and we can do that in Lyra because it is set up for multiplayer. Almost all the other ones are not. You can have to go right in your own network or find one. This is already built into the Unreal Engine, so this is great. Also working with bots. That's another thing, and understanding NevMesh. So again, it's going to be a lot of AI, but it's also going to be a lot of players and people giving you feedback, and that is hugely important.
Things like picking up power-ups and
picking up power-ups, game balancing, that sort, understanding the need and where the focus is, because I've had students in the past that will set up this huge entrance and such for their level, and then they don't block in the back. So what do? When I play test, I immediately turn around and walk away from the entrance. They didn't block anything, so I'm just walking off into the distance, and I'm going basically nowhere for 5 minutes and saying, this is the most boring game ever. And they said, well, you didn't go into the level. I said, no, I'm just exploring, but there's nothing back here. So mistakes.
There's something behind you, people.
Yeah. So, but if you create this large world, you better take things into account, which is containment of the player. And that's something that they don't really talk about in a lot of these other courses I've seen out there, which is, look, players will do one thing about your game. They will try to break it. Okay. They will try to break it. They'll try to find the flaws. They'll try to find the little holes and such. And so you have to understand that half the time you're going to be there just to create a barrier to keep the players in the area you want them to play. So again, it's also about the layout, the design, the understanding, because everything should have a purpose. Because we can't create these big, massive MMOs where people can run around. Sometimes we want a very tight thing, whether it's a death match, whether it's a multiplayer team versus team, understanding what a broadside is, understanding game balance. It doesn't mean if I do team versus team, the two bases are going to be exactly the same. That's basically, okay, I'm going to take one part of my level, copy it, duplicate it, slide it over, turn around, call it a day. It's like, no, that's horrible design. We'll also talk about some of the faux pas that designers make, which is when you look at this picture that I have right now, the guy surfing, on this, that's what a lot of people make their games. It's like the flat Doom, everything is on the same level. And they forget about this is 3D. What about like the underpass? What about an overpass? What about high areas? What about campers, choke points, that sort? And again, a lot of studios or a lot of lessons don't cover that. And I do, because it goes into game theory, design. What is the purpose of this? How long the gameplay is supposed to be? Because that's another thing. It's like, how long do you want people to play this? Do you want it to be repeatable? How do you do that? We can look at UI. We can show how quickly can you get the person into the game and that sort.
Fantastic. Well, that sort of, I think, answers one of the other questions, which is it fair to say that this session is a preview or sort of a syllabus for the CG Pro Game Dev course? And really the presentation that Bennett is giving is about the industry and getting into the industry and what that's about, whilst answering questions about the course.
That's the first part, but let's talk about career paths. Because again, everyone that approaches this will be coming into this as a different thing. The foundation is design. All right, getting it. Because here's the funny thing. I've met a lot of artists, animators, character modelers, that sort, that say, hey, I'm a game artist. And I look at that and went, really? Okay, what engine did you get it in? And they were like, what? I said, what engine? You say you're a game artist. Which game engine did you get it into? And they're like, no, I just made it in like Maya, or I made it in Max or Blender. I just made it. And I said, then you're not a game artist. You're an artist. There's a difference, because the most important thing is it's not creating the content. It's getting the content into the engine and getting it to run or to function. That's the only way you could really be called a game artist. You can make content, But again, if you don't get it into an actual engine and get it to run properly, you're not a game artist. Again, you're a 3D artist. You might be a fantastic modeler. You might make the best ZBrush characters around, or sculpting and that sort. But again, if you can't get it into a game engine, it's like you never made it at all. All right. And that's what a lot of them miss. Now, it comes to career paths. The ones I've created or helped train and help get jobs have people that have been character modelers or designers. Okay. The environment artist, the character animator, the prop artist, the actual level designer or scripter, which is kind of hand in hand. There's the visual effects artist, the UI or UX designer, as well as the visual development artist. Now, here's a question. Which one do you think is the hardest to get a job in out of all these careers that I just listed?
Your answer's in the chat.
All right, let's see.
If anyone wants to have a stab. Which one's the hardest? Which one do you think is the hardest niche to get into in the games industry?
Okay. Well, here's the answer. It's the bottom one. The visual development artist. Why? Because almost everyone that starts off as an artist wants to be that. They want to be the one that draws the pretty pictures. That also tends to be the most competitive. It's never to say no, all right? Because I'm very upfront about it, which is, hey, if you want to be a concept artist, which actually is a very archaic term now, but if you want to be a visual development artist, you got to be the best. Because right off the gate, you are competing against the best. Because these are people that once they get in there, they will never leave. All right, you literally got to kill them before that or wait for them to die before that spot opens up, because it is the most competitive and it is the hardest because, again, you are competing against the best right off from the bat. And again, it's not to say that it can't happen, because I actually fought tooth and nail with the school one time because I had two individuals that were talented concept artists, and they said, well, they should learn 3D, they should do this. And I said, no. These guys are that good that they don't need to do this. Eventually, they both mastered ZBrush, but they are so good that they could do that. And this was a guy named Anthony Jones, who also goes by Robot Pencil. And the other one is Kalen Chalk. One was a character artist. The other one was a environment artist. And like I said, they can make it, but they're also very rare. So in other words, if part of this thing that we're going to be doing with this class goes beyond just me teaching, it's also me mentoring. It's me looking at what you want to do, what you want to produce, and me guiding you that. Again, this is what I've done professionally for 15 plus years of guiding, mentoring, and teaching, as well as being in the industry. So I have that knowledge as well as those connections. And I'm going to ask you a dozen questions, which is, what are your goals? Who do you want to work for? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? That sort of thing. And that's what I prep you for. So that's something that comes even outside of the teaching of the course, which is me prepping you to be a professional, me helping you to get into the industry as best I can. And again, with each one of these, I'll look at your portfolio. I'll show you how to set it up. I'll talk to you about resume. I'll talk to you about your cover letter. I'll talk to you about how to cover. We can even talk about internships as well. All right. And again, here's the other part. What software besides Unreal, which is kind of the foundation. All right. Everything you make, again, it's very important to try to get into the engine. But what are the sort of software? Well, again, whether you do 2D or whether you do 3D, it all depends. Now, these are the most common ones. Like for 3D, Photoshop. Well, Photoshop's common for everything, but Photoshop, Substance, Maya, ZBrush, Unity, Unreal, because it's always good to, be able to be fluent in both Unity as well as Unreal. Even though we're going to teach Unreal, there's a lot of things that you do in Unreal that would transfer into Unity very easily. There's other ones out there like Nuke, Blender, Godot. There's other engines. There's the core engine, which is a spinoff of Unreal. Also, 2D. I'm a huge fan of 2D. In fact, it's very profitable in the 2D industry. Stardew Valley. Well, I'll even talk about things like that with people that do the indie stuff. And a lot of the indie go directly into 2D. So we'll talk about them. We'll talk about the implementation of them. All right. As well as talking about the career. Okay. By the time you're done with this whole program, we should be able to help you with your website portfolio, whether you want to get an internet presence, whether it's because mainly it's self-marketing, getting in LinkedIn, Instagram, ArtStation, getting on Twitter, understanding what a cover letter is and how to make it. You got your resume. There's a whole science into making a business card. All right. As well as your demo reel. So things like that, things we can render out in Unreal and get almost cinematic quality as part of your demo reel. That's also be a part of this. Okay. And yeah, there's a lot of great resources. CG Pro, that's a great group, as well as the connections that they have. Epic itself is a huge supporter of education. There's Udemy, which is kind of hit and miss. There's, full-time game dev. There's Gnomon, which I'm an alumni as well. There's the Unreal Fellowships, which I highly recommend. If you got a summer or a nice block of time, try to get into a fellowship, because not only do you get into the same sort of thing that we'll be teaching you, it's the connections you make. I've made dear friends as a result of doing the fellowships, whether it's online or in person. Like I said, most of what you're going to find out is that this is a community thing, which is also kind of important because you don't get that with some of the other ones, which is you meet people, you talk with them, you find people, you find your tribe. And so, and again, I'll support a lot of these other groups because maybe we don't cover what they need, but I do know someone that does. So again, those sort of connections you look for. All right. Any other questions?
Yep.
Okay.
We do. So where did we get to? Someone says, thank you. Hi, Bennett. Thank you so much for your time. I'm a fresh graduate out of school, and I'm currently working on my portfolio as a game capture artist. I was wondering if you know of any upcoming in-person events where aspiring creatives can meet.
Yes, GDC. Right off the bat.
Yep.
GDC is, out of all of them, I would say GDC is the most important for game developers and game artists. All right. That is the place to go. So that is for any graduate or anyone. I always say, save your money, get a friend out there, find a hotel, whatever you need, get to GDC at some point, because that is truly the core for developers. That is also the artists. That is the most friendly. That is the most likely place that you can make connections. Again, when I got back to that, that actual part about the your own business card, and we just had a speaker a moment ago. His name is Ryan Zingler. Ryan was one of my graduates, and I challenged him. I said, Ryan, I want you to make about 300 business cards. Bring them with you, and this is your challenge. Try to give away as many of them as possible and try to collect as many as possible. Ryan did that. And when he came back, not only did he give away all his cards, he actually came back with about 150 cards with notes on the back of who they are. And these are people that he started then connecting with. Like, hey, you remember we met over here? We were talking about this. He started getting job offers very quickly. And he eventually got picked up by Crystal Dynamics. And he's been there for 12 years now. All right. That was a direct result of him going to something like GDC, making those contacts, putting himself out there and such. So again, GDC right off the bat is the first one I'd recommend. E3 is really good, but that's a lot more for marketing than anything else. It's nice to make contacts there, but 9 times out of 10, the moment that you say, hey, are you hiring? Unless they're doing portfolio reviews right there and then, which is rare, they send to say, oh, just go to our website, or here, submit a level from your game or something like that. So GDC is much more personable. And that's the one out of all of them that I always would recommend, more so than SIGGRAPH, because that tends to be more the technical, more so than E3, because again, that's for the marketing. But again, as long as you can go there, if that's what's most convenient for you, go there just to make a connection, just to get someone's card. learn who the HR person is, get their card, and then start sending out your portfolio, your contact, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, everyone's in marketing, right? I mean, whether you're a company or an individual, and the more you start talking to people, I always found that having interviews, the best way to get good at interviews, go have a bunch of them, go start the process moving. So start understanding the language and
exactly that. It's building a network, building a network, but building a network of friends and contacts, not just people that can get me a job.
Yep.
Underlying, that's the truth, but don't go on there. It's like, hi, I'm such and such. Can you hire me? Like, oh, so much for that friendship. So in other words, networking is important, but don't ever do that just on the pretense of, I want you to hire me. All right. Don't do that.
Like the Pitbull lyric, it's better to ask for advice than it is to ask for a thing. If you ask for advice, people may end up giving you the thing anyway, but if you ask for a thing, then people think you're trying to get something. It's more about friendship, connection.
Yeah, be a friend, not someone that's looking. It's like, be a friend that's looking to get in an industry. Don't be a beggar that's trying to get, that's begging for a job, because that's an immediate, that's a red flag.
Right. Yeah, try and give before you get. Right. So another question here, somebody's saying, do you think in the future we can see film assets be applied straight into Unreal Engine without optimization? Ideally remove offline rendering, just do visual effects in real time.
As much as Unreal or Epic tries to tout Nanite, I don't think it's going to be the end all of optimization. Yep. In other words, perfect example. All right. My buddy, he worked at Double Helix. Originally it was Shiny, then it merged with one of the other studios and they became Double Helix. One of the first projects that they got was Star Wars Episode 3 to turn it into a video game. And they got all the assets from Lucasfilms, okay? And the problem is that Lucasfilms or Lucas Games at the time could not get their game to work. They tried, and it's like, apparently it was like 3 different groups tried and failed miserably. So they went and they contacted Double Helix because they were doing great at just they had a great engine, they could churn out games, they could do multi-platform, so that was very appealing to Lucasfilm. So they went and they gave them their game and all the assets. And my friend Mark, who was kind of like saying, okay, let me see if I can get this loaded up, he tried everything, could not get it to work. And so he's, okay, I need to borrow 7 computers just to process this. So I know we should be able to do that. He finally jerry-rigged something to load up the level. When he did, it was the scene from the senator's office. So the chancellor's office where Mace Windu and everyone else was going to fight later. So we looked at that and he said, okay, this is nice, beautiful detail. There's the city of Coruscant through the window. Okay, why is this not loading up? I don't see anything in here that really should tell me why this doesn't load, because it's a very simple level, And he started looking around, looking at the details, and said, okay, this is not bad. There's nothing really here that's explaining it. He decided to break the camera, which is he dislodged it from its basically the barriers or the collision geometry, and decided to go outside of the Emperor's office or the Chancellor's office. And he started flying over the city of Coruscant, and he started noticing these buildings. In fact, he was looking at these towers in the back, which were toothpicks to him. He started flying towards these. And as he kept getting closer and closer to those buildings, the details started coming up to the point of where he said, Ben, you won't believe it. I got to these towers that were toothpicks in the background. These things were over 100,000 polygons because they had rivets.
Right.
It's like what are they thinking?
He used to get cars from car companies, and they would have the stitching modeled in the seats.
Exactly. So this was ridiculous because they didn't know how to optimize. They didn't seem to understand that you could have just done a matte painting, a flat polygon for those backgrounds, because you were never meant to leave the office. But they literally took their entire set from the movie and tried to stick it into a game. All right. No optimization at all. And so what he thought were toothpicks were all these towers that were up to 100,000 polygons just for something that was in the background you would never touch, see, let alone, get to that detail, let alone rivets. He almost like screamed. He's like, these things have rivets. Why? So
like a millionth of a pixel, the rivet is there.
Yeah.
So essentially, no, basically, is what you're saying. But and even in offline, even in film, we've optimized. People think optimizing is only a games thing, and we've optimized in film visual effects for forever.
Well, I know Transformers had a huge effect on optimization because that scene in Transformers 2 with the Devastator, that literally fried the Lucasfilm renderers.
Yep.
It literally exploded. It had a meltdown. And so Lucasfilm says, we are never going to allow you to do that again. So they started doing optimization, which they set poly limits. They set texture sizes and such.
Even with a giant render farm, you still got to be careful.
Even with the giant render farm, they literally had a fire as a result of the Devastator.
Yeah.
And like I said, poor Mark, he made the biggest mistake, which was he decided to switch to wireframe. And he said he was blinded because it was like so tightly packed. It literally almost crashed just because it was trying to draw all the lines.
Right. I've definitely had similar experiences too. So there's a good answer there. I got a few more questions, so I'm going to keep going through these. So someone's saying, any portfolio tropes to steer away from? I graduate from SCAD this spring. I'm currently setting up a portfolio to apply for jobs.
When you do your portfolio, have your name on everything. Lay it out like a gamer would. So in other words, depending upon what it is, you need to show, obviously your wireframe. You want to have your poly count. You want to have your texture sizes. Okay. Regardless of whether it's for character, whether it's for prop, that sort. Always make sure that when you have your demo reel, you start off with your name and your profession title. And like I said, just get through the intro real quick, which is just have that card up there at the very beginning, which says name, title, and then get right into the meat of it. And the first thing you do, always start with your best piece. Your reel itself should be no more than 2 minutes. All right. And you need to wow them in the first 10 seconds, because if not,
they won't watch the other.
Because my buddy over at Blizzard, he says, I have to go through 1,000 portfolios a week.
Right.
He said, I am looking for excuses not to look.
Yep.
Okay. So you need to wow them the first 10 seconds. After that, you go through your stuff and then you end with your second best piece.
Yep.
Okay. Then after that, have your contact information and get out. All right.
Any subjects you should avoid? Any sort of things that are cheesy or overdone, or things that's better? That's
in the cover letter. All right. Well, like I said, with your artwork, always make it has to be finished. Never do a work in progress. And again, make it sure that whatever you're submitting is the kind of thing that that studio does. All right. Or a group of studio does. If you submit a bunch of 2D stuff, I don't care how fantastic it is. If that studio does not do 2D, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. All right. So in other words, make sure that whatever you're submitting for your reel, one, doesn't look like, oh, I did this for homework. Also, be prepared to answer questions. All right. Which means if someone contacts you and says, hey, can you tell me about this piece? Have a story. All right. If it's a character, talk about the character's background or why you came up with it, that sort of thing. Just don't say, oh, it's a character. No, they want a story. They want to see your involvement. They want to see what this means to you, whether it's a gun, whether it's, a special type of gun. Just know that people are going to judge you very differently depending upon what you submit. Obviously with characters, they want to see good anatomy, but they also want to see fantastic stuff. They want to see, can this really work in our world or our engine or that sort of thing? And I'll talk a little bit about ways of submitting or competitions. That's another one. All right.
Great. Hopefully that answered the question. Feel free to ask again that person if that didn't. But no, next one we got, will the game course be focused a bit on optimization and tech art as well?
Towards the end, we will get into, like I said, tech art that could be like blueprint, because tech, that's all encompassing. That means something that's not immediate, that sort of thing. But like I said, as far as the technical, this course is going to be kind of like, we got 8 weeks, but you'd be amazed at, we'll try to be in depth, but there's so much to cover, because material editor, that could be a class unto itself, lighting, optimization, blueprinting. Like I said, each one of those can be a course all unto itself. And so we're going to try to hit those as many as possible, but also not overwhelm you. So in other words, there's a balance to all this, and optimization comes towards the end when we decide, okay, does this really need to be a 4K type of box or texture or that sort of thing? So we'll look at your frame rate, we'll see how it plays, and we'll also do looking at through the camera that said, okay, where's the red zones, where's the green zones? Because Unreal will help you determine that. Like, hey, you're really texture heavy here. Oh, by the way, you can look at your textures, your texture count. It'll say if you're over, now we need to start optimizing. So everyone loves to try to get all the really cool stuff in first, but then we start looking at it, and there's a whole process, a breakdown. And that's the other cool thing, is that when we start creating our stuff, I'm going to bring in some of my former students that are in the business, people from Naughty Dog that are going to come in and say, okay, former students of mine said, okay, we need to knock that down. Are you crazy? Why are you doing this for your lighting? But it can be brutal, but it's honest, but you learn. Okay. And then they'll say, this is how you want to optimize it, or this is the way you do it. So you start learning some of the techniques from what they do in studio. And sometimes they'll say, yeah, you can put more into here as far as their lighting, or you definitely want to see, like, instead of doing, like, one of the big differences that because we're going to be doing gaming, we're going to bake our lights. All right. It's because even though Lumen is awesome and even says that you can do everything real time, we're still going to do some of the standards, because not every studio has switched over to Unreal yet or uses non-baking. So we'll be getting into baking just to put in stuff so we can get that frame rate that we need.
Sorry, I was on mute then. Like,
it was like long pause.
Years of talking online, and I still can't figure it out. So somebody else has asked, from my knowledge, I believe Lyra has C++ coding integrated into it. Will students who don't know coding be able to keep up?
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, this is more approaching it from a designer, more from a level artist, for basically creating a game that's playable. And again, blueprint will keep at a minimum. That's if we want to, like, okay, this is how we can create a jump pad. We do this in blueprint. If we want to have a door that's triggered or that sort of thing, it's more game related of just getting an instant effect. And it's not going to be code heavy, And so again, I want to keep you guys around. This is more focused on art and design. All right. And use of the engine and kind of shortcuts, how we could do it here. In other words, instead of doing this as an animation, we'll just do it as an animated text or a texture, just using texture coordinates and a panner or a rotator and such. And so we'll be looking at, okay, the thing that we want to do is we need to create a really cool experience, but we also want to contain it, which is sometimes, depending upon if this is going to be considered a death match, we will do the layout this way. If it's going to be team-based, we do it this way. And again, we're going to, take a look at your level, and we're going to strip it down. We said, okay, you need to put something here. You need to watch out for that. That's a choke point. That's a dead end. In other words, keep the game like in a death match. Keep it fast, which means no dead ends, no corners if possible. Laying out of power-ups. Basically, it's what we call the line, just be able to run through them all three or such in a row to pick them up and to keep going. It's all about speed. And then we get into the team, and it's more tactics. It's looking for narrow areas, things to command, to dominate, that sort. Very different philosophy with each one. And also, if we ever get into vehicles, that changes everything as far as the size of even a doorway or a passageway or that sort. So again, depending upon what type of thing, you're going to get a whole different philosophy on how to lay out the level.
Right. Another question here. Someone says, as an environmental designer, what kind of intro roles can we expect to apply for?
Well, environment artist, the big difference is that when I showed you the list of here, okay, there's the environment artist, which is you're going to be making the props, based upon a theme, a particular one, a set. That's really what you're doing for environment and making it work. The level designer is very similar, but usually the level designer does not actually make the 3D art. They instead take all the art and then build a level, which is what we're going to be doing a lot here. But the bigger thing is here under scripting, and that is making the environment interactive. The environment artist can create a set, but essentially it's stagnant. All right. It's not interactive. The doors are there, but they don't open. The chest can be there, but it's not going to pop open, or it's not going to have a power up. So environment artists create kind of like this theme set, that sort. But the level designer is the one that takes it all and then makes it interactive, turns it into a game or like a game. So okay. Interactivity is a huge deal. Oops.
Great. Just looking down here. Somebody asks, is animating an important skill to learn over modeling?
It's like it's another career path because, again, a person can make a great model. Awesome. Great character. Great. Is it rigged? No. Then it's a statue. Does it animate? No. It's a statue. All right. So in other words, yes, animation is always huge, because again, this is interactivity, whether you're animating a character, whether you're just moving a door, whether you're doing an in-game cinematic, all these are important. So yes, animation is huge and is definitely, definitely very valuable. The main thing is that creating a rig that works in the game engine specifically, because you need to know the limitations on how many bones is that allowed. In other words, for a biped or a quadruped or whatever some of the creatures are, it's one thing to animate it in like a DCC like Maya or Max or Blender, but then getting into the game and making sure it works, that's just important because it's not just drag and dropping a prop. It is drag and dropping something that's supposed to be alive and move. And if it's controllable, being able to make sure that all your animations link up to the button keys. So it's a tougher job than even what the industry animators do in film as well. So like I said, it's a tough job, but it's good.
And yeah, animation as a profession takes time to master that, in whether you're in games or film. But I know that in games, as you said, you're dealing with animating bits of movements rather than the entire sequences all the time. Sometimes
it's not an A to B. It's because you are animating a chain of animations that need to work seamlessly.
Yeah.
So whether the character sits, gets up, runs, and such, that's all button pushes as well as that. So your animations need to be able to line up with whatever the player does. So it's unpredictable. So in many ways, game animators have a tough job. And you're going to work pretty much with the programmers because a lot of time the program's like, can you change the speed? Can you make it faster? Can you make it slower? Can you make it shorter? And so you'd be amazed at how much an animator in games has to do. And I've worked with some of the best.
It's a lot of iteration, right? You have to do a bunch of animations, throw them at the engineer.
Yeah.
They test them. They say, "Yep, no, all these got to be like this," and it's kind of cool in that way. You're in as an animator. Typically, it's kind of you're on your own animating something. It's not super collaborative, but different kettle of fish. Okay. Another question somebody asked about car rigs. Do we talk about car rigs?
Probably not in this course, but again, we're always looking to expand vehicles. Unfortunately, if we were in using something like Unreal 3, which that one alone had vehicles and some of the best ones, then yes, definitely. Vehicles in some ways, whether if we decide to do, in other words, there's ones I was talking about with like game prototyping. That's another future class where definitely a driving one, where we talk about setting up the vehicle, the rig, the animation, the controls. That's more for an advanced course. And like I said, there's so much that we can cover. But again, even 8 weeks is short. And again, vehicles alone, that's a whole course unto itself, which is fantastic. If, for example, you can look at things like the vehicle in the samples in the Unreal Editor, you get a good idea with that. There actually is the vehicle mode. You can either do it indoor in a track or use the outdoor one. So there's 2 different rigs. Those are always great just to try to see if you can backwards engineer. Now, can we do stuff like Grand Theft Auto, that sort of thing? Oh, yeah. And like I said, those are more of what were classes to prepare for what we call the prototype class.
Right. Look for more classes in the future.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is definitely the springboard to lead into all those. And the way I explained to Ed was that I wanted to make it a very tight focus because I know what they look for. I know that they look for people that know the material. So that's actually a good material and lighting. That is a class unto itself, and that's one I proposed. Blueprinting for games, that's another class I proposed. And those are 2 of the most important ones because besides this as a springboard, those are the ones that people are going to look for on your resume. And then prototyping, fully creating your stuff or being able to know how to create a vehicle game or a shooter game or a survival game, that sort. Basically starting to create your template and your game on top of that.
Yep. So another one just came in. Somebody saying, I would like to work as a game cinematic artist.
Okay.
Any suggestions on moving towards that? Should I feature certain things on my reel? Should I learn animation? And that's an interesting question because I know that some game cinematics are done by games companies themselves. Sometimes they outsource it to VFX companies.
Yes.
So it's a kind of, probably a 2-part.
Well, that's the interesting thing now, especially with virtual production and the advancement of sequencer. That's the funny thing is that most of the time, and even I'll admit, my school was guilty of that, which is most schools do not teach in-game cinematics. All right. Sequencer was pretty much left alone, whether it was called sequencer or when it was called matinee. Most of the time, most films that you saw, Blizzard is one of the exceptions because you have Blizzard Cinematics, which is that in studio. They are one of the exceptions. Riot's now kind of expanded into their own in-game cinematics. When I was at Interplay, we almost always shipped out all of them to other studios to go and do, which is always funny because they, of course, do the high-end, high quality, and they do these great in-game cinematics. And then by the time you get to the game, you have a bunch of low poly type stuff, and it looks like a very different game. Final Fantasy is always is the most guilty of that, as well as Capcom. But again, that's because usually it was done by an outsource group that would take your stuff, make it really, really high poly, high end, because they didn't have to worry about the limitations of the game engine. But now, because of the success of Unreal, being able to create something like that Matrix demo, you're getting high-end quality, and you could all do it from your own laptop using a single sequencer. So that was one of the things that we also talked about as either a workshop or as a class called in-game cinematics, which on the other end is just good virtual production. That's what most of the fellowships do. And so in-game cinematics is going to change, because now people realize we can have cinematic quality in game using our same characters, our same setup, and we can have a small group do it. So in other words, an in-game cinematic artist is going to become more and more predominant. So in other words, someone that could put together, and if you look at some of the stuff with the in-games cinematics or the cinematics being done by the Unreal Fellowship, you are seeing some quality stuff. But again, that's where materials and lighting comes in to really master that. Understanding volumetrics, atmospherics, how they set the mood, camera work, cinematography, lighting, all that is, like I said, it is literally a film course in many ways. And I've been working with some of the best ones of guys coming out of cinematics, and now we're being interested in, hey, what can we do in game? Whether we're doing it on a volume or an LED stage, or just doing it all contained within Unreal. I think that we're going to see a huge change over the next 2 years as the game community starts seeing, oh, we can do this in game and we don't have to outsource it to another studio. We can hire our own animator to do this, or our own level designer, and they understand it and they can do it. It's like, yeah, you can do that very easily. And again, we're going to probably see more and more over the next couple of years, especially now that people can work remotely.
Right. Yeah, no, very good points there. And also a shameless side plug to anyone interested in filmmaking in Unreal. We have an Unreal for Filmmakers class, which has been running for 2 years and was very inspired by the fellowship, and we wanted to make the fellowship accessible to everybody. So if anyone's interested in filmmaking in Unreal, that would be a great class for you. We do also have another question, which is the shortest question of this evening. It's Niagara ?
Oh,
I'm not sure what that means, whether that means are you covering it in the class or
visual effects. We'll touch on Niagara. We'll even go over a little bit of how to manipulate, but literally creating something from scratch and such is not as easy, and also very in other words, a week is not enough to cover that. That too is that's like the third class I would pitch, as far as we need to do in-game visual effects, creating with Niagara, whether it's particles or fluid effects, because that's one of the huge ones that came out in 5.1. Just knowing that all these things, or letting alone attaching an effect to a character, to a weapon, that sort of thing. That is a class, like I said, that's probably one of the more valuable, even out of materials as well as blueprint, because there's a demand for visual effects artists for games. Right. Riot is always looking for visual effects artists, whether it's 2D or 3D, because they combine the two. If you look at what they did with Arcane, that is actually 2D and 3D combined to get an effect. When you do a flash of a gun, that's a 2D effect that's kind of like on these meshes or cards. But how do you create that? I'll even talk about some of the competitions that Blizzard has for visual effects artists, because there's a huge demand for that, because MMOs, all these sort of games, they need a really cool effect. That's like the third tier after really cool textures, really cool animations, really cool effects, and then sound comes forth.
Right. Awesome. So we don't have any more questions on deck at the moment. If anyone wants to add any more, please feel free. We're at about an hour 15 at this point. So Bennett, I don't know if there's any summarizing of the rest of what you wanted to talk about that you want to do, or...
Yeah. Most of this we'll be covering in the class, but one of the other ones is right here. Let's talk about that, which is, if you haven't been to this site, go to Game Dev Map, okay? And that will give you a listing, and you'll see, it'll be like a picture of the world, and you see all these red dots. Every red dot is not a studio. Every dot is a city, and when you click on it, then you'll see all the game studios that happen to be in those areas. Okay, this is where you start your research, which is look up a studio, find out what games do they develop, what's their studio size, what's the reputation of that studio, okay, which engines do they use, then look at their job postings, look at them and see what they're looking for, because that will tell you the software, that will tell you what the responsibilities are, and that's the way you kind of look at it. And here's the other question I ask: do you play their game? If you don't, you better. Okay. Because that's, I always ask, if you want to go to Blizzard, what do you think the if you manage to get a job interview, what is the first question a Blizzard employee or HR person is going to ask you?
What's your favorite Blizzard game?
Nope. The first question they're going to ask you is Horde or Alliance.
Right.
Okay. If you can't answer that, the job interview is over. Okay. It's not, do you play our games? Because they already assume that. If you didn't play their games, why are you there? Okay. I've heard from artists that say, oh, yeah, I want to work in the industry, but I'm not going to play their game. I'm like, then you're not going to get in the industry. And guess what? That person never got in the industry. If you want to work for a company, the first thing you do is you play their game. All right. That gives you insight. That gives you things to talk about, because they are going to say, what do you like about our game? And if you tell them, well, I don't play your game, then that's like first strike against you. Okay. When I ask Horde Alliance, if you can't answer that, job interview over. Okay. The next question they'll ask is, what is the highest level character that you have in World of Warcraft? Okay. After that, they're going to ask you, how many characters do you have over the level 50 that you grinded from 1 and got to 50? Because that tells them how long you've played their game, how many times you played their game, and the variety, and you're understanding that. That's true for just about every game or any company, whether it's Obsidian, because they'll ask you, so which of our characters do you like playing? What's your favorite class? What do you think about this? Again, they're kind of probing, because if you're not a gamer, you're probably not going to fit in their culture, because everyone there is pretty much a gamer. All right. So that's an important thing, which is, yeah, if you want to work for a company, play their game. All right. Games, even if they put out multiple. But again, play the one that you would love to work on. Okay. Find out, do they have internships? Because sometimes if you're not quite ready, getting an internship can be your way of getting in there, learning their culture, that sort. I've had several of my students that do an internship and then they get their contract extended and extended again. And I said, you do realize that they're not just holding you there to get free labor out of you. They're looking to see if they want to hire you. And if they get you past 3 months, they're going to hire you.
Right.
All right.
Something else that I've seen quite a bit from people, and I'm seeing more in the market, in the industry, in the social media, is people wanting to build their own games. People,
the indie route.
Right. Any thoughts on that, kind of going it on your own? Would you say, like, go work for a company first, have a crack at it? No. What are your thoughts?
No, you don't have to be in a company to create your own game, whether it's Unreal, whether it's Unity, some of the other ones out there. You just need discipline, okay, motivation, as well as the time, the dedication, that sort, because it's all dependent upon you. There is no one that's going to give you a break. And one of the best examples, and I would highly recommend this, go get the book called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. Okay. It's about game development, the good and the bad. It talks about the industry, and it really, I read that book and I actually kind of like got emotional, because I knew a lot of these people, and I was hearing or reading about their struggles when I worked with them, or when I was at another studio and I was hearing how difficult it was for them. Whether it was Obsidian, and how difficult, because originally Obsidian was Black Isle, who I was with. And so these were a lot of my dear friends that I didn't realize how bad they were off, during that time, but they stuck with it. The same thing is about, like, the guy that did Stardew Valley. Okay. Here's a guy that started off that he just wanted to try out programming, and he always loved Harvest Moon. And from that, he developed Stardew Valley, because he hated the new versions of Harvest Moon and wanted to go back to the 2D stuff. So he decided, okay, well, I'm going to try to create my own version of Harvest Moon. It took him 5 years to complete that game. But here's the thing. He admits 3 of them he screwed around playing World of Warcraft. That's the lack of discipline. But he had a girlfriend that fortunately supported him, so he was able to finally complete this. And once the game shipped, he became a millionaire overnight. Okay?
Yeah.
So there is a payoff as long as you keep that discipline, because he stuck with it. And because he was, and it's a lot easier now with indies, because Kickstarter, with Indiegogo, all these, you can find people to fund you, Patreon and such. So it's really, really good if you want to do that. Now, what I'd actually recommend is that maybe try, and if you don't want to work for a company, but you want to do your own stuff, try doing the mod community first. All right. Go find an existing engine, and go to something like Nexus. Go to nexus.com and try some of the level editors there, whether it's the creation engine, the GEC, some of the other existing things, and try modding first, putting it up there, see the response, because again, you're putting yourself out there. I have a dear friend of mine who was probably one of the best modders around, and he started with Elder Scrolls. And he started with Elder Scrolls, started working with that, went to Elder Scrolls 2, and by the time he got to 3, he had a fan base. And guess where his fan base was? Bethesda. They were huge fans of his work. They wanted desperately to him to come and go work for them, but he didn't want to move out to Maryland. And so he kept turning them down. But they said, okay, when are you going to put out your next mod? So in other words, if you're not really certain if you're ready to commit to that, try doing a mod first.
Right. It's a good hybrid approach to not having to build the whole game, but a bunch of the things that would be involved in making
practice
a game.
It's like working out. It's like you just get the practice in, get that muscle memory, that sort. And then when you're ready, go into, your own project, because you're going to learn a lot from the mod community, because the mod community will also be very vocal about your stuff. But you also might have a fan base. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of community, working out, it's a bit like that too. Sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself when you're by yourself and you go with a workout buddy. In learning this stuff and in being in it, community is also, I'm assuming, very important, as it has been for me in visual effects.
Yeah. But again, it's also getting people to try out your game or a sample of it, getting feedback, that sort, because again, you can get that tunnel vision. That's the problem, is that when you do indie, it's that discipline, but it's also being willing to put yourself out there for someone to test out your game that you have no control of. You have no idea what the reaction is going to be, but listen to them. Always pick someone you respect, and someone that actually has an understanding of what gameplay is, that sort, and understand if they don't get your game, it's not because they're stupid. It's because maybe you didn't explain it as well as you think you do. Okay? So in other words, it's always good to put your game out there to be play tested, just to see. Start with friends, people you trust, then put it out in the mod community or things like that if it's available.
Great advice. I know there's some people now who are creating multi-format entertainment, so that's probably a better term for it than that. But if someone is making a film, they're making a game with the same assets. Hasdall's always my go-to example of this, because he's doing just that, making a game, making a film.
IP. That's just it. Here's the funny thing. You want to know what the most profitable thing to do is as an indie? Try to find a company that's an established company and try to get a license from them to develop a game based upon their product. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, take a look at the KFC Colonel Sanders dating sim.
I will be doing that immediately. I have no idea that existed.
All right. It is absolutely amazing. And here's the thing. You know what the best-selling Xbox game was? It was all the Burger King. All those Burger King, they actually found some developers to do things like the Sneak Thief or that sort of thing based upon the Burger King characters. And they made bank off of it. It was the highest selling Xbox game to come out. Okay. So in other words, existing franchises for restaurants, you would be amazed at, getting that license and then being able to make money off of it just for doing some of these games. Like I said, the Colonel Sanders dating sim.
I love you, Colonel Sanders, a finger-licking good dating simulator.
Yep.
I just found it.
And here's the funny thing. The reviewers on it, they said, I am embarrassed to say I love this game.
I bet. Wow.
When I was at Interplay, Spot the Dot, the 7-Up commercial, we did a video game for Spot the Dot, and it was one of our best sellers.
It has 11,740 very positive reviews.
Uh-huh.
Wow. My eyes are opened.
So again, sometimes just finding a franchise. So it's like I said, fast food seems to be the goal, one of these little gold mines that people don't even think about. They're like, what, it's like, do a Caesar's Pizza, do Subway, do something like that, turn it into a game, and you might be able to, or get the license from them and turn it into a game.
If anybody out there wants to make an In-N-Out burger puzzle adventure, I'm all in. Wow. Amazing. So we've gone fairly long tonight, so I want to ask if there's anything else that you want to mention before we wrap. I don't have any more questions. If anyone has any, throw them in. But if there's anything else that you want to mention before we wrap.
Not that I can think of offhand. I think I've kind of covered the generalness of, what's out there. The thing is that, again, it's also of, once you get this all done, it's a matter of how you package it. All right. And that's talking about your resume, your website, all that, because kind of like when I talked about, you can make the 3D art, but if you don't get into a game engine, it's kind of the same thing, of that when you finally do all this, say you go through and you do the entire course, not only this class, but all the other things that we do, at the very end, it's how you present it, how you get it out there. Because the best way to describe it is, your website is like, okay, think about your favorite meal, okay? Your best food, everything possible, the best combo plate you can imagine. So whether it's steak, everything else that goes with it, you have that, and then you have it all prepared. It's actually perfect. But now I said, okay, you ready to serve it? Good. And you go and you grab the nastiest looking trash can lid. I mean, this thing, you lift it up, it literally is sticking to the lid. You flip it over, it has green gunk and other things you can't even name. The smell is horrible. And then you take all that food and you dump it right on top of it, and then you hand it to me. That's what a crappy website is. It doesn't matter how good your artwork is. It doesn't matter how good if your presentation sucks, if your website doesn't make it easy to go through, if I can't get the information, you just gave me a nasty trash can with your favorite stuff on top of it, and I don't want to see it. So again, it's also about how do you present yourself, whether it's your resume, your cover letter, as well. And that's the sort of thing I'll go into, which is all the tropes. Be very careful what you do when you write your cover letter, because you want to tailor it exactly for that company. Don't try to actually do a boilerplate and just say, okay, Blizzard, I'm going to strip that name off. Riot, strip that name off. You just go down the list and it's a boilerplate. It's bullshit, and they'll catch it really easily. So tailoring yourself towards the company as well as presenting your work. That's one of the most important things, because that's the end. Like I said, it's like getting right towards the finish line, then you stop and walk away. So in other words, how do you sell yourself? And that's what part of it is networking, part of it is your internet presence, and part is your presentation as far as yourself through your resume and your work through your website, and how you do all that, whether it's a demo reel or just a website. What do you put in there first? And that's one of the things that I do every time, which is I'll look at your stuff, and if I said, I don't know what you are, that's a problem. So,
Right.
and that's the thing. So it's like, tell me what you are, tell me what you want to be, and then show me how you're gonna present it to strangers.
Yeah, that's great advice. I did the same things trying to get into visual effects too. All the same types of thing. It was sending DVDs to people in the mail, so different than what people do now. But
I probably went through a lot
deal.
of them. You know,
Right.
like
I spent ages on the cover of that DVD.
Oh my God! When Titanic shipped, when Titanic actually came out, we got so many DVDs, demo reels of people's work that I mean, it's like I didn't even know that many people worked on the Titanic, you know, but we were getting reel after reel of the ship cracking and such. And they said, "What did this person do?" It's like, "Oh, he did the lighting on the deck, so you just see a little bit of them." We got that for a month straight of just demo reels, you know.
Yep, but I think it was I'm always about less is more, because you can make it look good if you put too much quantity.
Focus. It's the focus of your best stuff. You know, getting it out there, explaining what you do, whether it's you show your textures, your build down, your wireframe, your 360 turnaround, your fly through. Again, the other thing I want to do is that for this type of program, I don't want cookie cutter. In other words, when you complete this program, you should have a tailor-made portfolio specifically dedicated to yourself, as well as made for the company or the studio that you're trying to target. Even if it's like 3 of them, at least you can start crafting it towards them. That's through your cover letter, that sort, because your reel might be kind of general, as in, hey, I'm a 3D modeler or I'm a designer. That could be the general part, but then we start getting into the specific, which is the cover letter and the resume, and you tick off those key words. Because one of the things we'll talk about is that in the resume alone, majority of the time they use what's called a keyword. Basically, when you submit your resume, they actually run it through a program. They don't even read it. They have a program read it, and it looks for these keywords. And if it doesn't get 80% of the keywords it looks for, it spits you out and you never even get reviewed. So again, we do a breakdown of, let's look at the job that you're looking at applying for. What are the keywords you need to make sure? And again, don't lie. Because again, you want to get blacklisted in this business, you lie. And they will, and boy, you get cut off really quick, because one of my friends, Jim Rivers, will talk about, he's like saying, yeah, if you lie, people are going to know, because the HR people, they all talk.
Yeah. It's a big but small industry.
Small world. Yes.
For sure. Yeah. And at the end, you're also not only going to have all the advice and guidance towards having a game, but if you're interested in making your own game, you will have a game as well. You'll have a game that you've made, which is really cool.
Game, you'll be able to show it and you explain it. And like I said, sell me on it. You know, that's part of what this whole program is, like, sell me on your game. What makes it interesting?
It's kind of a new thing to be able to do that too. And for a while ago, you couldn't make your own game. You might make some art that went in a game, but you wouldn't be making your own game. This is kind of a new thing.
One of the beautiful things is that because the mobile market, because of the iPad, because of Steam, because of that, we have so many platforms. We're not slaves anymore to the big publishers. We can go independent and we can make money off of that, and we can do quite well. But again, you better make that good game, because your studio can live and die just by that one release. So again, getting it out there, getting yourself known, whether it's your reputation, whether it's excitement, whether it's reviews. And again, this is where we start.
Same principles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bennett, thank you so much for being a part of this. I appreciate your time. You're sharing your knowledge, wisdom, experience, going as deep as you have. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, we've had a lot of chat in Discord, our new Discord channel, which we just launched this last week. We've been streaming in there. We've had people in there. We've had people on Twitch and through the Facebook group. So thank you for pouring your heart out into the community. I appreciate it. All
right. Fantastic. Like I said, I'm always here to help talk to people, to help mentor, to, just to hear their thoughts about that or questions, because sometimes it's just, have you ever thought about this? I've had guys that have come in, it's like, I really want to do this, but I don't really have a passion for it. So, well, talk to me. Tell me what your passion is. I had one guy that was a programmer. Okay. He was a programmer, but I started looking at his work and I said, you ever thought about visual effects at all? You really seem to have an eye for it. And he's like, well, okay. I said, well, tell you what, we offer a visual effects class. Take it, see how you do. Not only was he become one of the best students, but because he was a programmer, he could get into the nodes. This is using Nuke and reprogram it right there on the fly and get a better result. His first job was to work on the Avengers. Then after that, he worked on Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. He called me up and he said, I have a problem. And I said, what's that? And he's like saying, they want to extend my contract. And I was planning to go back to school. And I said, so let me get this straight. You want to quit a job in the industry just to come back to school to get your degree so you can get a job in the industry? Okay, I think I see where the problem is. He's been in the industry now for 10 years. All right, he did come back for one semester to finally graduate. But when he showed his portfolio, oh, yeah, this is what I did on the Avengers. Oh, by the way, this is what we did on Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. So that was part of his student reel. And he only did that for one day because then he had to go to work the next day to work on the next film. And he did this and he's still there. So again, it's one of those things where once I start to learn about you, I can think of other ways that you might make it that you might not even thought about.
It's an amazing industry, and also now they're splitting out into all sorts of
especially now with virtual production. And like I said, we're both using the same engine, and it is a game engine.
You heard it here,
but it is a game engine.
It's just an engine now.
It's just an engine now, yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next time we get to do this. I appreciate you being a part of CG Pro. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you again.
All right.
If anybody's interested, please send us messages if anyone's interested in joining us in February for this fantastic games course. We're offering it at a very, very reasonable price, and please ask us about it. We're here to answer questions. We appreciate you all being here tonight and asking great questions tonight. Thanks for all making this a great event, and look forward to another one soon. I hope you all have a lovely evening, and take care of yourselves.
All right. Have a good night.